the post in terms of majority vote. In the US, they have this electoral college system. Let's take a look at the story by Sam Gituku.
It's probably the most draining electoral campaign in the world for candidates who have to almost physically visit every city in the 50 states in a bid to convince voters to vote for them.
Hello, Arizona!
But unlike in most democracies like Kenya, in the United States, the more than 140 million voters do not directly elect their president.
God bless the USA!
The wishes of the 50 semi-autonomous states are represented at the ballot by 538 electoral college participants. But just half of them, 270, are needed to win the race. Each of the 50 U.S. states plus the District of Columbia have different numbers of electors based on their population in the most recent census. The state of California to the west of the country is the largest, controlling 55 electoral votes. The smallest, like Montana, has just 3 electoral votes. Republicans and the Democrats therefore choose people to sit in the college only that the party that wins a state like Florida gets to send the 29 required voters.
And then they would meet in their state capital a few weeks after the election, cast the ballots, generally as a formality, for Clinton or Trump, depending on who won the statewide vote in a popular vote sense, and then those results are sent to Washington and they're announced before the new Congress in early January.
So show up early and vote.
In the last days of this year's race for the White House, the two candidates, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, have been staging their campaigns in the so-called swing states, these being regions that are not solidly aligned to either party, the most hotly contested being Florida, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, among others. The aim being to be the first to hit 270, which is half of the 538 electoral college votes. In the latest opinion polls, Democrat Hillary Clinton seems to be assured of securing at least 268 electoral votes, while Trump trails with about 204. 66 electoral votes are still out there in the hotly contested states, with the potential of swinging the election to either side. In 2012, President Obama polled 332 electoral votes, a decline from the 2008 performance of 365. Clinton's spouse, President Bill, polled 379 in 1996, an improvement from his first term's 370 in 1992. In the year 2000, Democrat Al Gore won the popular vote by 500,000 votes, but lost in the Electoral College by just 5 votes after losing the Florida state to Republican George Bush. To imagine that this house is the center of the fierce battle in the battleground states sounds unconvincing for its silence. However, the candidates have their arithmetic in check to ensure that their path to the White House remains in check and also tilts to their favor. Sam Gituku, Citizen TV, at the White House, Washington, D.C.
By Sam Gituku is what we're about to start discussing this morning. And as we continue with our news review, we're joined by Brian Weke, CEO, Institute for Education and Democracy. Glad that you made it finally. You were in traffic or something?
I know everybody blames it on traffic, but...
blame it on the weekend.
Discipline. Lack of discipline.
Yeah. Anyway, let's discuss that electoral college system because it's something different, unlike in Kenya's situation where it's about the majority vote, where if you get more votes than your opponent, then you're clearly in the lead. But in the US, we've seen situations where sometimes you might get the majority vote, like in the case of Al Gore a few years back, but simply because he lost Florida to George Bush ended up with more electoral college votes and became president. Now, I don't know if that's a system that could work in the Kenyan way. Start with you.
Well, first of all, I think America is a federal system. It is consists of states, and politically, to create a balance and to create equity, the electoral system had to look at all the smallest of the states like Delaware and Rhode Island to the biggest, California, to have a stake in selecting the President of the United States. So the electoral system was developed as one way of providing a means for the federal states to be able to come into the electoral system other than the direct vote. So as a way, it works very well for the United States, but I don't know whether it is it is transferable to other countries. But I think in one particular case, everybody who participates in the electoral system has a say in the American presidential election, because it doesn't matter whether you're a minority or a majority. While in our case, we have a system whereby the winner takes all, in the sense that if I'm elected a senator, it doesn't matter how many other votes the other person got, as long as I have +1. A member of parliament the same, despite the fact that in fact the majority block, the majority vote in that constituency or in that county could be more than the numbers that I got or the candidate got.
Yes.
So in a way, I think in some countries they have proportional representation.
Yes.
And I think in our particular case, maybe we probably wouldn't benefit much in having an electoral college system like the United States. But if we really want to balance things in our country and to provide opportunities for minorities, then the best and then the gender issue as well, the best representation system is proportional representation that is used in countries like South Africa, where and many European countries, where you are elected according to the percentage of votes that you acquire, rather than the total number of votes that you acquire +1.
Or where the Prime Minister is elected by the elected members, appointed by the elected members, and not necessarily directly elected by the people. Okay. And of course, the electoral college system is one of the interesting things about the U.S. election, which takes place tomorrow, and we'll be following that. But as Mheshimiwa Hassan says, in Kenya there's a bit of misrepresentation, not really misrepresentation. It could be argued that a bit of imbalance between some of the highly populated counties or regions as opposed to others, and probably the electoral college system could help sort out that balance issue.
Well, to me, the reason why we have such kind of a system in America is simply because it was trying to address what we call the fault line in their society, which was, you can recall there was a civil war in America, and it was about states. Some regions, the northern states, were fighting with the southern state. So they came up with a system that's going to address that. Now the question should be, does Kenya have such kind of a fault line? No, it doesn't. And therefore, when you import that system to Kenya, you'll be addressing a problem which does not exist in our society. Our fault line in Kenya is what we call tribalism, where you have a situation where in our politics, if you are, let's say, for instance, a poor person, or you come from a minority group, most likely your chances of ascending to the presidency are quite minimal. And therefore, we should have what we call a constitutional design that is geared towards addressing that issue, where we either probably come up with various methods which other societies have done to address the issue of the tribalism. And there are several. One, there is the idea of devolution, and which is a form of federalism. But you see, that one usually applies to societies where people are trying to secede. In Kenya, we have come up with the idea of devolution. You devolve resources, and when you look at the statistics, it appears very clearly the minority groups are the ones who are benefiting more from
in terms of resources.
Yes, in terms
but politically, do you think politically devolution has actually helped in terms of balancing?
Well, maybe to address that before he takes it, but to me it's not sufficient, because our tribal competition is about big tribes trying to get the presidency. It's not about a small tribe trying to get presidency. So, because in Kenya you'll see the main war is about the Kikuyus and Luos and Luyas and the Kambas. It's usually a fight of about 6 tribes. So meaning, even if you send resources to various regions, so long as these big tribes are still competing for power, they probably the war will still, the potential conflict is still there. The other way is probably to address that. One is what we call a constitutional government, that is a coalition government, which appeared to have worked between the year 2008 and 2012. But of course, there are negatives of a constitutional government. Is one, it's not usually democratic. There's the issue, why is it that you're only accommodating, let's say, Kikuyus and Luos? What about Kambas? So maybe the best case scenario, in my own opinion, would be we come up with a system that improves on our presidential systems, which probably we can ensure everyone has a stake and an equal opportunity to ascend into the presidential
Are you also in agreement that probably the U.S. system of using an electoral college cannot apply in Kenya's county system?
I think it is something we need to study critically, because clearly this process of first past the post does not work for this country. If you remember discussions when we were crafting our constitution, there was a major discussion whether we go the parliamentary system way or the presidential system. Now, when you had Kenyans initially, they wanted a parliamentary system, it's because they knew there is no chance a Suba or a Masai or a Turkana or a Pokot for that matter, or you know, the so-called smaller tribes would ever be president, because it's a game of numbers. And we know very well that in our country tribalism has really entrenched itself politically. Having said that, you can see clearly we've had 4 presidents and all these presidents come from the big tribes. So there is no way. When would you get a Somali? If Yusuf Hassan decides to inspire people for him to become president, the chances would be next to nil. So the so-called the big 5 tribes would always dominate politics in our country. And that is the reason why we have said, and we still continue to argue, that this first past the post business does not work for this country. And that is the reason why you can see there is a lot of interest, regardless of how government is being run, regardless of how corruption is rampant in our country, regardless of all these heinous issues and crimes, still different tribes will have to coalesce on their person. Of course, we tried to reduce the pressure with introducing devolution in our country. And that is the reason why you're hearing the discussion is that because the presidency is about not only politics and controlling politics, but it is about control of resources. That is why you hear the so-called it is our time and our turn to eat. So that is the reason why you saw we tried to reduce the pressure by creating counties so that we can devolve resources. Again, if you look at the current budget, what we are devolving still is a tip of the iceberg. And that's the reason why you're hearing another saying that we want more money being spread to the counties. So there is need for us to do a serious stock take in our country to ascertain whether this first past the post system works. Because I can tell you for a fact, and you can take this to whichever bank you bank with, this first past the post business, it's about the big tribes. But even the big tribes, still you see there is a problem, because the so-called big tribes, Kenya has only been ruled by 2 tribes, and the script that is actually being sold is for the 2 tribes to keep on interchanging who is the first one and who is the deputy. So as a country, and for us to deal with the issue of tribalism and ensuring that there is equity and justice in terms of being president of this country, there's need for us to critically think through how we are going to ensure that the so-called minority tribes become president.
Of course, some of these even big communities are not restricted to 1 or 2 counties, because even if you go to the minority counties, you still find members of these big communities, as it were. So probably it's a discussion that will continue. Of course, the electoral college system is something that's very interesting to watch in the United States election, and it's something, of course, we'll continue covering it, especially tomorrow that the elections are happening, and on Wednesday morning, of course, when the results start trickling in. Of course, the electoral college is going to be one of the biggest talking points of that election, and it go either way. Of course, remembering the case of George Bush versus Al Gore, a very interesting outcome there. You can read about it. Let's now take a look at something else, and of course, it's not featuring on any front page of the dailies, but today KCSE kicks off. 577,079 candidates are sitting their first written KCSE exam this morning, and probably a chance for you to wish those candidates from your constituency best of luck.
Indeed. In fact, not only from Kamkunji, I wish all the secondary school candidates in my constituency a successful and a happy examination. Also to the students who are doing it in Nairobi and the whole country, in fact. But I also wanted to say a word about how the KCPE has been conducted. Yes. This has been the most successful, I think, in my memory, the most successful exams we have had. No leakages, no shenanigans, and to a certain extent, I think one needs to praise our Secretary of State for Education.
Cabinet Secretary.
Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary.
You're already into the U.S. system.
Cabinet Secretary for Education, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, he's done, and his team, the Kenya National Examination Council, they have done a fantastic job. And I think if they continue that way, our exams would become credible. The kids who are going to get those results when they finish would have credibility. And it will be a win-win situation for all of us.
Yes. And of course, for the first time in many years, KCSE is happening without this cloud of teacher strikes, cheating. Of course, ranking of schools is back. Very interesting to watch what will happen this time around.
Yes, for me, I was an ardent supporter of ranking. The idea, the reasons which were given by the former Cabinet Secretary for Education for banning ranking were hollow. They did not make sense at all, because it appears he wanted to hide the mismanagement of our schools. Because if you have done a good job, you should be exposed. If you have done a bad job, you should also be exposed. And therefore, I did support the amendment to the law that was brought by Dr. Chris to ensure ranking is provided for under the law. Number two, I also take this opportunity to wish success to all students from Kiharu and also the Murang'a County. That is the Form 4s and also those who have just completed their primary school last week. And I also pray that we have done several interventions. When we rank counties this year, I would hope that Murang'a will be now up there. For a long time we have been a giant. I can recall when I was a young person, Murang'a was always being ranked position 5, position 3. But now I think for some years we went a little bit lower, but I hope this year with the reintroduction of ranking, Murang'a will be among the top, at least top 10 counties in the entire country, because I also believe education is the most important endeavor society can undertake, and we need to pool all our resources to ensure our education standards go up. As to the strikes, I want to congratulate the leaders of the unions and also Madam Masharia, the boss of TSC, for coming up with a good way of resolving these conflicts. We do have now a collective bargaining agreement that has been signed. I also pray that teachers are well paid, because that will act as a motivating factor towards doing a good job. So I thank TSC, I thank teachers, I also thank government for agreeing to add some money to teachers.
Yes, and of course, CS Dr. Fred Matiang'i has to take credit to a great extent with regard to the success of the exams this year. You agree?
I think first, let's try and understand issues. When I hear Honorable Yusuf Hassan saying that this is the best KCPE under the watch of our Cabinet Secretary, then it pains me, because, you know, Honorable Yusuf Hassan is referring to the previous 2-3 under the Jubilee government, which has been a sham, for lack of a better word. And Honorable Matiang'i has really tried to cleanse that particular process. So Yusuf Hassan is not the best since the country post-independence, but the best since Jubilee took over power. And you can see clearly there was a clearly thought out process, and that is the reason why you saw there was an agreement signed by TSC as well as the Kenya National Union of Teachers. And I hope Honorable Irungu Kangata, signing an agreement is one thing and honoring the agreement is another. So we do hope that the government will actually definitely honor the agreement. So I hope it is not only for the purposes of ensuring that exams run very well. So I do hope that the Jubilee government would be able to implement that collective agreement. Key things for me. You know, the reason why initially there was thinking that we ban ranking of schools is because head teachers were actually going out of their way to literally steal exams and work with the cartels to ensure that they paint their school in good light. And that is the reason why banning of schools, the major reason why banning of ranking of schools was actually implemented. Because again, it is not about you imagining the top the way Honorable Kangata is wishing his county to emerge the top. But the question was, again, it was never about how. It was the end justifies the means. So if you, so again, that cartel, and I really want to thank the minister. He's done fairly well with the new chairman, Magoa, of the Kenya National Examination Council. Have done fairly well to ensure that we try and minimize cheating during exams. We hope that the same method they used during KCP will be implemented during KCSE. And I think if we continue that way, then the credibility of our exams will be restored.
Okay. Now, in a short while, we'll be taking a break, and when we return, we'll be discussing the discontent over the 61-member Jubilee party campaign team that was named on Friday by President Uhuru Kenyatta during the National Governing Council meeting at Bomas of Kenya for the party. Of course, sections of the media have quoted Irungu Kangata and his displeasure. He'll tell us more about that when we return. Of course, we'll also be discussing the war of words between former Cabinet Secretary for Devolution Anne Waiguru and the Deputy President William Ruto. All that when Power Breakfast returns.
Tangu lini uliona mwanamke anaongea mbele ya wanaume? Unajua yule vile. Wewe unajua nini? Nyamaza. Mumetoka mbona mkuja mpigie kelele hapa?